everybody, welcome back to my channel. Let me adjust the green screen. It's super wet outside. The dogs are out there. Hopefully they'll stay out, but my apologies if they come in and start barking. So we're still playing catch up on the Karen Reed trial, and today we are going to talk about Matt McCabe, who I nicknamed McChucklehead because of how much he smiles and laughs, and it was just so off-putting during his testimony. After everything that I've watched and I've heard, including the one day this week, I still don't understand how they've charged her with murder. I don't feel like we're there yet. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. If you see why they've charged her with murder, let me know. But we'll get there. We'll get to who testified this week. We've got to get through Matt and then Jen, his wife, and hers is going to be a long one, y'all, because it took me forever to get that presentation done. There was a lot with that woman. And like I said, I call her the epicenter of bullshit because it seems like every single person has some connection to Jen McCabe in this case. So hers will be long, and I apologize ahead of time. Maybe you can just watch it in small chunks. I mean, I don't expect it to be like 2 hours or anything crazy like that, but it will be a longer video. So for all the new subscribers, hello. I'm so happy to have you here. If you haven't subscribed, I hope that you will. I hope that you will join us here on the channel and join our discussions that we're having about this case. There's also a Facebook page you can join now. The link is under the video. And go ahead, give this a like now, if you don't mind, and subscribe and share, and let's jump into Matt McCabe. Okay, so Matt McCabe is living in Canton. He's lived there for 20 years. They've been in their current home for 10 years, and they previously lived on, I think, South Cliff Avenue for 10 years. He lives with his wife, Jen, and 4 daughters. He's been married for 23 years. His daughters are aged 15, 16, 18, and 20. One of his daughters is Allie McCabe, and he works for an IT solutions firm, and he's been doing that for 15 years. So he worked on Friday, the 28th, and then he met friends who he said were the basketball parents at a restaurant called Canton Junction in Canton before his daughter's basketball game. His second oldest daughter plays on the varsity team, and his wife, Jen, was with him. They were there for about an hour to an hour and a half. Then they went to the game at Canton High School. It was at 6:30, and they sat with the other parents at the game. In case you're wondering, because Lally asked anybody that had a kid that played in that game, I'll let you know that the game was at Canton High School. They were playing against Foxborough. It was a close game. It went into overtime, and ultimately Canton lost. If I know it, you know it, so there you go. After the game, he drove his younger 2 daughters home, and he and Jen went to the waterfall. They were in Jen's vehicle. He said it was a Suburban or a Yukon, a large SUV with 3 rows of seats. The basketball parents apparently have a group text, and they were talking about where they were going to go after. And in his text to the group, he said that they were going to the waterfall, and the Kolakithases, who testified earlier, met them there. Jen's sister, Nicole Albert, was there with her niece, Caitlin. On the car ride to the waterfall, he was on the phone with a friend who is a hockey coach, and they were talking about his daughter Allie's hockey team. They arrived at Waterfall at 9 p.m. He said Nicole Albert, Caitlin Albert, Tristan Morris, Chris Albert, Julie Albert, and Nick Kolakithis was there. He said it was just family and friends hanging out. And he was drinking because Lally asked everybody, and his drink is super special, so I thought I would include it. He was drinking vodka water with a splash of Crystal Light because he was in a diet competition, so he was staying away from beer. Yeah. I don't know why we needed to know that, but apparently we do. So they were at the waterfall until midnight-ish, about 3 hours. Nick's wife joined them about 15 minutes after they got there. Brian Albert and Brian Higgins joined about 45 minutes later, and John O'Keefe and Karen Reed got there at 11 p.m.-ish. So Julie Albert and Jen McCabe have been friends for years. He knew Brian Higgins, met him a few times, and knew that he was friends with Brian Albert. He knew Karen Reed, and he knew John O'Keefe. They met when he became, as he called it, the caretaker of the kids. John lived a couple hundred yards away on a different street. His third daughter is the same age as John's niece, Kaylee, and they met in kindergarten. Jen McCabe was very involved in helping John with the kids. Jen and Matt coached kids' sports, and they had play dates with the kids. They were all friends. Kaylee and their daughter were very close friends. Kaylee was at their house a lot and had sleepovers, and she was very close with Jen and very mature. He said she could hold a conversation with adults, that she was really mature for her age. And given what she's gone through in her life, it doesn't surprise me. He says that he met Karen Reed in the summer of 2020. John had reached out to Jen and asked if he could bring the kids over to swim. And John thought that Karen and Jen would get along because they both have MS. He saw Karen at sports events for the kids. Matt and John didn't discuss relationship stuff. And at the waterfall, he said when John and Karen came to the table, they were giving, hugs, handshakes, what have you. John and Karen weren't arguing or fighting. He talked to John about Kaylee's acceptance to Bishop Feehan High School. He talked to Karen. He said it was just a normal conversation. And that at one point, Karen asked, how do you guys do it raising 4 girls, you look happy. And his response was, well, we're at a bar. They left the waterfall after midnight. Hang on. They were the last table to wrap it up. Brian Albert, Brian Higgins, and Nicole Albert left. Jen McCabe, Karen Reed, Karina Kolakethis, John, and Chris left. And then he and Nick Kolakethis were the last to leave the bar because they helped clean up the bottles and stuff off the table, and they talked to the band. Conversation about what they were going to do after the waterfall. Brian and Nicole Albert said they were welcome to come back to the house for a drink for Brian Jr.'s birthday. They invited the whole table, according to him. Now, if you remember, Nicole testified that she only told her sister, Jen, but this is Brian. Hold on, I think my husband's trying to get a hold of me. Okay, sorry. I guess he butt dialed me on the radio. He's outside working on the property. Okay, let's get back to it. Sorry. Ugh, gotta love my life. Anyway, Brian invited basically the whole table to come back to their house for a drink for Brian Jr.'s birthday. They talked about going to D&E Pizza. They had done it in the past. Karen asked and wanted to go make pizza, but he and Chris Albert were adamant about not going because they were doing the diet competition, and he says Karen asked to go more than once. I don't really understand the significance of them asking how many times she asked to go to D&E. I mean, maybe she was just craving pizza. I don't know, but he always asks, how many times did she ask? Did she ask more than once? Apparently she asked more than once. Jen McCabe was in the driver's seat. He was in the passenger seat. He said that Jen got a text from John saying where to. He told Jen to call him because she was driving. So she called him over the Bluetooth that's connected in the vehicle. They gave John directions to 34 Fairview. A few minutes later, John called and said that they didn't know where the house was. And Jen said, "You know where Bella lives?" This is a friend of her daughter and Kaylee. And they gave directions again. John said, "Great, we're on our way." And Matt assumed that we meant him and Karen Reed, but he doesn't know who John was with. The waterfall to 34 Fairview is about a 4 or 5 minute drive, and they parked on the left side of the driveway. When they got there, Caitlin Albert, Brian Jr., Julie Nagel, Sarah Levinson, Brian Albert, Brian Higgins, and Nicole Albert were all in the kitchen dining room, at the table, and at the kitchen island. They were at the house from 12:20-ish to 1:45-ish. Julie was excited to see them. Jen showed a, quote, foolish video to the kids at the table. Apparently it's raining men. And this is some joke in the family. Somebody, I don't know, has an umbrella and dances to the song or something. I don't remember. I didn't really write that detail down. Maybe I should have. I don't think it's important. But she showed the kids this It's Raining Men video. He said Jen is friends with Julie Albert, and they know her son, Colin Albert, but they didn't see him that night. They also didn't see their daughter, Allie, or her car at the house. He said Julie Nagel looked out the door in the family room 3 to 5 minutes after they got there. Okay. He says that he knew Julie Nagel, but not Sarah Levinson. Julie helps Brian Jr. dog sit for them when they're on vacation. She's a friend of their nephew, Brian Jr. Julie Nagel's brother came to pick her up, but she didn't want to leave, so Jen offered to take them home. Again, I don't understand. She texted him to come get her because she was ready to go home, and then if she changed her mind, why didn't she text her brother and say, "Hey, changed my mind, I'm going to stay, and I'm getting a ride with the McCabes"? I don't know. When Julie went out, someone said another vehicle was out front. He assumed it would be John and Karen. So he looked out the side door or window. Julie went out the front door. Again, she was looking out the door from the family room. To me, I don't know. Just take the side door. You're right at the driveway. I don't know. But Julie went out the front door. He said there was a big SUV in front of the house, and it was a dark color. He looked out again in a few minutes, and the SUV had moved up towards the flagpole. He thought it was weird that they hadn't come in, and there was a Jeep parked by the mailbox. He says he looked out a third time out the door, and the SUV was further up the road by the bushes separating the yards 30 to 40 feet from the flagpole. He says he saw tire marks that were a weird wave in the road after Julie came in. He said Julie was outside for about 1 minute, and he assumed the SUV left the tire marks. He didn't see anyone outside the SUV, no footprints leading away from it. He didn't see anyone inside the SUV or the interior light on. He looked out again, and the SUV was gone. Jen was trying to communicate with John to see if he was there, and she got no response. The SUV was out there for 10 to 14 minutes, which it really seems like a long time. It really does. Unless you drop somebody off and you're waiting to hear, like, "I'm good, I'm going to stay," or "It's okay if you come in," something like that. I don't know why you would stay out there for 10 to 14 minutes, but we'll never know, probably. He says that he looked out every 3 to 4 minutes. And here, and let me just say, because I did have the comment, the cars are not to scale in this. It's just to give you an idea, to visualize what he testified to. I know they're not to scale. I wasn't trying to make them to scale. I just want to give you an approximation of where these things were according to the witness testimony. Okay. So he says the Jeep was parked by the mailbox. Now, remember, no one in Ricky's truck, Ricky, Ryan, and Heather, no one saw the Jeep. But he says the Jeep was parked by the mailbox. The first position he sees the car in, I circle it because he said he was looking out the side door or the window. So I circled that area. He says that it was in front of the Jeep. Then he looked out again and it had moved towards the flagpole, which is position 2. And then it had moved up the road further. He said he looked a third time out the door. It was further up the road between the bushes separating neighbors' yards, 30 to 40 feet from the flagpole. So I just kind of put the back end there so you know the SUV is moving that way. And he saw the tire marks, which, I don't know, he said they were a weird wave, so I put that graphic in there. Let's see. He said he drove himself, Jen, Julie, and Sarah home at 1:45 to 2 a.m. He brushed off the snow. He used the wipers when he was driving. He backed out of the driveway and headed towards Chapman with the passenger side towards the house. He didn't no overhead lighting where the SUV had been. The whole PB&J conversation happened with Jen, Julie, and Sarah because there was a loaf of bread and peanut butter and jelly in the back of the SUV, and apparently it was hilarious. And he says he didn't see anything in the yard. So real quick, I'm going to show you the driveway video again of what you see when you're backing out at 34 Fairview. There was a light dusting of snow at the time. But otherwise, like I said, it was dark. It's dark in the video, so just so you have an idea. And somebody had commented, and I wanted to bring it up, about the SUV pulling forward. And I drive a big lifted truck. And the commenter said she thought the reason Karen pulled forward was because with the truck behind her, their headlights would be shining right in and like in her mirror. And that's super annoying. And we know at least one person got a migraine from the band. So maybe she had a headache. I don't know. But even if you don't have a headache, that's super annoying. So maybe she pulled forward a little bit to kind of get the lights out of her mirror. I thought, wow, that's a plausible explanation. And that's why I ask you guys to comment. Because sometimes you guys think of things that I haven't thought of. And sometimes you see things differently than I do. And I like the different perspectives. So keep doing that. Keep popping off in the comments with your ideas and your thoughts. Because I love it. And I love interacting with you guys in the comments. Our discussions have been great. So they got home at 2:10 to 2:15 a.m. All the kids were home. They went upstairs. Jen wanted to watch a show. He didn't want to watch it. They talked about their youngest daughter, and then he went to sleep. Let's see here. Okay, so the morning of January 29th, he woke up, which is a good thing because Lally's always like, you woke up? No, he's still sleeping, dude. Sorry, Lally he's like on my last nerve. He woke up to the screaming of Jen, Jen, Jen loud shortly before 5 a.m. Jen was on the phone, but it was so loud that he thought somebody was actually in their room yelling. He asked Jen, what the hell is going on? She said she was on the phone with Karen and she couldn't find John. Karen said the last time she saw him was at Waterfall. Jen immediately starts calling people, friends who live near Waterfall. He thought Karen was crazy because he saw the SUV arrive at 34 Fairview. Funny that Jen doesn't remember that, right? And when we get into her testimony, you'll see why. So how drunk was Jen that night? Because apparently it didn't dawn on her, wait, no, you didn't leave him at Waterfall. So the next call with Karen, they told her that they saw her at Fairview. Karen said she didn't remember. She said she cracked her taillight. And John had mentioned meeting up with someone else. So they called that person. And they called anyone that he could have met up with, but nobody answered. Matt called and texted John, where the hell are you? Now Karen and Jen are out looking for you. Jen went downstairs to make coffee, as you do when you have a missing friend. They were going to drive to the house of the person they thought John possibly met up with, and then he heard yelling in the front yard. It was Karen Reed. He told Jen to tell her to shut up because she was going to wake up the whole neighborhood. And this happened about 30 minutes after the first phone call with Karen. She was yelling, Jen, Jen. Jen said she was going to go with Karen to find John. He says he looked out the bedroom window and Karen Reed's car was in the driveway. He was concerned about them driving in Karen's vehicle because of the broken tail light and because of the weather. Jen and Karen left and it was dark out. An hour later, Jen called and said they found John at 34 Fairview. Okay. All right, I think I'm caught up in my notes now. So Matt drove to Fairview. He was blocked by first responders the way he was approaching the house. So he turned around and came to the house from the other direction. So, you know, there's Chapman and there's Cedar Crest that you can come from either way. One way is shorter. I assume he was going the shorter way, which I believe is Cedar Crest. So he would have turned around and come from the other direction. He said there were cruisers, a fire truck, and an ambulance there. He parked on the side of the road. Carrie Roberts' Ford Explorer was parked near the driveway. He knew who Carrie was, but didn't really have a relationship with her. They had a brief conversation, and she told him that she was going to drop Karen off at John's house and go pick up John's parents in Braintree. He offered to go with her to help pick up the parents, and then he learned that Jen was in the house waiting to be interviewed by police, so he went in the front door of the house. He said Jen, Brian, and Nicole Albert, along with Officer Lank, were there. And Jen was shocked, and all three of them had drawn faces. He asked what the hell is going on. Jen had called and said they found John at Fairview, but gave no details. Other officers came in later. He says Lank asked him to step outside and ask if he knew what happened to John. He said when he last saw him, Matt said, and asked when he last saw him. I'm sorry, my brain is not engaged this morning. Matt said the last time he saw him was at Waterfall because he saw the vehicle out front, but he never saw John. So he didn't say, oh, I saw him outside Fairview. No, he says the last time I saw him was at Waterfall, which, you know, it's true. He was at Fairview for 4 hours, and then he went home after that. 2 Massachusetts state police officers came to his house around noon. It was Trooper Proctor and Trooper Yuri Buchanan, and he had never met them before. They asked him to leave the room while they interviewed his wife, and he went up to their bedroom. And they eventually, they interviewed him without Jen in the room. Brian Albert was also there, and he also spoke to the troopers. Days later, a man and a woman police officer, he didn't know their names, spoke to them at their home in the dining room. He says when Jen's in crisis mode, she's very calm. She's the one who can make people feel comfortable. Okay, so then we get to Cross, and it was done by Yannetti. And we find out January 22nd, he was at his daughter's hockey game and then Hillside with Jen. They saw John O'Keefe and Karen Reed there together. He said they were enjoying each other's company, there were no problems, and there was a big group hanging out for at least an hour. January 28th at Waterfall, he said the mood was festive. John and Karen were happy about Kayleigh's acceptance to Bishop Fan. They were excited. There were no arguments that night. And Karen wasn't drinking much at Waterfall. That's going to be an important statement. He testified at the federal grand jury on April 26th, my birthday, 2022, that John and Karen didn't seem overly intoxicated. So this is pictures of Brian Albert and Brian Higgins at Waterfall. This is the Waterfall surveillance video. He says that they're two big guys, and this is what I keep referring to when they're asking, like, were they play fighting? Were they squaring up, you know, getting in a fighting stance, the different ways that they've come at this. When the video's played, you can see they're kind of, you know, and then one of them goes up behind the other and kind of grabs them, you know, from behind. Matt says they were playing a little grab ass with each other and bear hugging. So in the first picture, you have the grab assing, and in the second picture, you have the bear hugging. He says they were not squaring up or in a fighting stance. Matt McCabe left the Waterfall at what time, guys? You know this. You know this answer. You know it without even looking. 12:10 to 12:15 a.m. We know this can't be true because he says he was one of the last to leave, but Chris left at 12:13, so it couldn't possibly have been then because Chris left at 12:13. You're the last to leave. 12:10. Yeah, that doesn't track. That doesn't check, right? So Jen walked out before him and was in the vehicle when he got there. He said Jen parked in the driveway at 34 Fairview. There were two cars in the driveway at the time. Oh, wait. Hang on. Did I miss a video I was going to show you guys? Sorry. I need to refer to my notes more. Oh, no, I guess I don't. Okay. So he said there was no black SUV there when they arrived. The Jeep was parked in front of the mailbox facing Chapman on the street just to the left of the driveway. It was there all night until Brian Higgins left. The Jeep was not blocking the driveway. The back of the Jeep was at the edge of the driveway. Brian Higgins never went out to move the Jeep. 5 minutes after arriving, he said he saw the black SUV. The Jeep was still there. The black SUV is in front of the Jeep, but he doesn't know how far apart they were. So he is given conflicting information regarding the black SUV. He says it was straight out the front door. But in his afternoon interview with Trooper Proctor on January 29th, he said the SUV parked to the right of the house as you look from the street. He says he didn't say that. So once again, we have law enforcement being inaccurate in their reports. And maybe they were. Maybe. But there's just so many times that we're going to hear this. He says, looking out of the house, the SUV moved further up the road, which would be to the right of the house. He denies telling Trooper Proctor on January 29th that when he first saw the SUV, it was parked to the right of the residence. He says the SUV was in front of the house when you come out the front door. The second time he saw it, it was to the right of the house. He's shown Trooper Proctor's report. He was looking out the front door or window, which is different than what he said prior. Now he says the third time the SUV was parked past the fire hydrant. So according to Trooper Proctor's report, that's where you see, I put Proctor report under the SUV. That's where it would have been if it was to the right of the house. He says he didn't say that. Then we have the Jeep in front of the mailbox. Now he says he's looking out the front door or window, so I circled that area. He says the SUV was straight out the front door. It moved up a little to position 2 and then past the fire hydrant, which is position 3. Again, I just showed you the back end, so you know it's moving in that direction. And we have the weird wavy tire marks. So if we compare the two, we can see the Proctor report, it was never there in his first version. The Jeep's in the same place. He's looking from a different place, which puts the SUV in a different place. Initially, it would have been closer to the Jeep. Now it's a little further from the Jeep, straight out the front door. The second position and the third position are similar, and the wavy tire marks are still there. Again, I know the vehicles are not to scale. And then Yannetti asked him, "Sir, is this funny? Because this guy," and I know that some people, when they're nervous, they'll laugh. But this guy laughs and smiles an absurd amount for the seriousness of what he's testifying about. The murder of a Boston police officer who he claims was a friend. I put this picture up there because that's one of his smiling moments. And like I said, it was just so off-putting. It just felt sleazy. Like, you know how people will always say like a used car salesman or something like that. It had that vibe. Like, it just made me feel like, ooh, you know, I didn't like it. So Yannetti says, "Sir, is this funny?" Matt says, "No, it's been 2 years of misery." Yannetti says, "You're smiling." And Matt says, "Well, you're repeating the same questions." And to be fair, he was, but the reason he was asking the same questions is because McChucklehead wouldn't just give an answer. You know, he's got to give like a whole narrative, even if it's a yes or no question. All of these people, I don't think it's possible for any of them to just say yes or no. They have to elaborate on every single thing. So he says that he had multiple conversations with family, including Brian Albert, about the case. He said that he could see the back of the SUV. He doesn't know if the headlights were on, and the wavy pattern of tracks could have been from a 3-point turn. He saw the tracks after he saw the black SUV. So this is just a Google map to kind of show you the red pin is 34 Fairview, and you can see the top arrow's pointing at Cedar Crest, and the bottom arrow is pointing at Chapman Street, just so you can kind of picture it in your mind. He told John O'Keefe to go down Chapman, which is the bottom line. Sorry, trying to get caught up with my notes so I don't miss anything that I jotted down that I need to add. So he told John O'Keefe to go down Chapman and turn towards Fairview, as if you were going to Bella's house. Go past Bella's Street, and the house will be on your left, is the instructions that he gave him. He assumed that John and Karen would be arriving from the direction of Chapman based on their conversation. You make a left on Fairview from Chapman. The driver's side would be closest to the house. The SUV was never parked in that direction. To be facing in the opposite direction, you'd need to do a 3-point turn if you would come from Chapman. On January 29th, Trooper Proctor interview, he said he saw V-shaped tire tracks that could be consistent with a 3-point turn. He says that he had not talked to Ryan Nagel about what he had seen. If Karen Reed came from Cedar Crest, there would be no need for a 3-point turn. He could see the V-shaped tracks, so he could see the lawn, and there was no 6'2" man lying on the lawn. He didn't see John in the vehicle. He didn't hear yelling outside, no screams of pain. No noises outside drew his attention. There was music playing inside, which I guess if it was loud enough, you wouldn't hear anything outside. He left at 1:40 to 1:45 a.m. with Jen, Julie, and Sarah. They left out the front door. He said the SUV was gone. There was no black baseball hat, no black sneaker. There weren't 45 pieces of red taillight, not even one, and no 6'2" man laying on the lawn. And then he says, "I wish I did," in reference to seeing John on the lawn. "I wish I did" is said a lot in this trial by different witnesses. Brian Albert, did they come into the house? I wish they did. Did they search your house? I wish they did. A lot of witnesses add the "I wish I did" to their statements. He doesn't recall leaving anything in the house. Now, remember Sarah Levinson's testimony. She said that Matt had to go back in because he had left his jacket inside. He doesn't remember that. He says he drove towards Chapman Street. He didn't hear Julie Nagel say, "What was that?" Julie never said that she had seen a black object or a black blob, or that it was 5 to 6 feet long, or that she'd seen a person. He woke up to screaming so loud that he thought the person was in his bedroom, and it startled him. He said Karen Reed was hysterically screaming, "Jen, Jen," in the front yard, really loud. Other than that, he couldn't make out her words when she was outside. He went inside 34 Fairview at 7 a.m.-ish. In the days after January 29th, he had a group text with Jen McCabe, Brian Albert, and Nicole Albert. On February 1st, he was at or near 34 Fairview watching what the investigators were doing in the neighborhood. He says he doesn't recall that. He says he wasn't monitoring what the troopers were doing. It's another one of those, I just happened to be driving by. February 1st at 1:34 p.m., he texts the group, "Troopers back out front, but in front of Asian house." He shows the text and he's shown the text, and like under his breath, the microphone catches him say, "What the hell? Who was that?" Brian Albert's neighbors to the right were Asian. Their last name is Chung, but he didn't know that. He said no one in the group asked him to clarify who he meant by Asian house. Brian Albert responded, "Right now?" Matt said yes, and Brian said, "Okay." Matt texted the group that he was trying to get a picture of what he was seeing. Matt keeps asking to see the text, and then when he gets to see them, he needs a flashlight to read them, so he has to get a cell phone from somebody and turn the flashlight on so he can read them. He says he just happened to be driving through the neighborhood at that moment, which, again, there's so many things that are convenient, coincidences, just happened in this case. Matt says in the text, "Looks like more has been dug up there, or at least looks like." And then Matt says, "Had to pick up a car, so drove through." At 3:01 p.m., Matt texts, "Very weird that she has been barely interviewed. The whole dead comment was just told. I was supposed to have them talk last night and forgot to tell Proctor to call her." At 3:03, Brian Albert responds, "Hope they don't think she's making it up after the fact for some reason." At 3:05 p.m., Brian Albert says, "But if they barely interviewed her, that's on them," meaning the police. At 3:05 p.m., Matt responds back, "Yes, she was hardly interviewed, and I think just answered what was asked." He says that they were discussing Terry Roberts being interviewed. February 1st at 12:51 p.m., Matt texts, "Ask Chris to ask some questions." Chris being Chris Albert, Brian Albert's brother. "Tell them the guy never went in the house." The guy is his friend, John O'Keefe. Boston police officer John O'Keefe is now just the guy. He says that he was not telling the group to get their story straight. He said, quote, "John O'Keefe never went in the house. It's not a story, it's a fact." After that text, Brian Albert responded with one word. Exactly. So tell them the guy never went in the house. Exactly. Now, I do have a video to share with you about that. Thanks once again to Emily D. Baker. You are awesome.
And you then texted your wife, Brian Albert, and Nicole Albert, quote, tell them the guy never went in the house.
What?
Correct?
Yeah, that's part of the same text.
What?
Yes.
Mr. McCabe, who was the guy that you were referring to? Does he have a name?
I'm so... What? Your group text is tell them the guy never went in the house? Sir, this is your group text. You didn't think this was going to come up? The prosecutor didn't think this was going to come up? How are we here when this is what's in the text that everybody presumably has? What the fuck have we been doing for...
And Nicole Albert, quote,
3 weeks.
tell them the guy never went in the house. Correct?
Yeah, that's part of the same text. Yes.
Mr. McCabe, who was the guy that you were referring to? Does he have a name?
That would be John O'Keefe.
The guy?
The group.
You're texting this 2 days after he died on your brother-in-law's lawn. And your comment is, tell them the guy never went in the house? The fuck? Do any of you all give a shit about any... No, you don't. No, you don't. I'm just going to keep reading.
To tell them the guy never went in the house.
All of the what the fuck.
That was...
No, you know what? You know what, chat? Motion granted. Motion granted. First of all, that. Some code red fuckery is what we've got. We've got some code red fuckery. You know what the fuckeriest fuckery of this is? I don't know this for a fact. This is Emily's speculation. I've not speculated much during this trial at all, but here we fucking go. I have to wonder if this extraction was done by state troopers or by the feds. Who extracted these phones? At what point did this finally become clear that in the midst of everyone being interviewed, someone finally extracted the phones? Because I am now hastened, reticent to believe that it was actually the state troopers and Trooper Proctor that extracted these phones and looked at these text messages. I just have to wonder if this was part of the discovery that came from the feds. I don't know if it is or if it isn't. It's not relevant to the jury if it is or if it isn't. But how do you do anything in this case but question what the fuck this investigation did? And why are we sitting here for 3 weeks before this comes up? And how did the prosecution not... At some point, doesn't it feel like the prosecution is just like throwing witnesses up there and then being like, do what you will. Good luck. And when they ask about the prosecution's prep, they're like, have you talked to the prosecutor? No, not for like 2 months. The prosecution's just like, what did you see? You're going to get cross-examined. Good luck with that, buddy. You're on your own.
I mean, you can't not agree with everything that she just said. 2 days. This guy is supposed to be your friend. And now he's just been reduced to the guy. How much harder would it have been to text, tell them John never went in the house? I mean, I don't know. That one just really got me. That went all over me. But moving on. So Chris Albert was never even at the house that night. So why coming from Chris saying the guy never went in the house, how is that reliable? He wasn't there. How the hell does he know, right? Where, why, and how John died has been talked about with the family because no one knew what happened. John never came into the house. They have no idea what happened to John O'Keefe. He never told anyone what to say to any investigator. No one in the family did in his presence. Yet we have Chris tell them the guy never came in the house, but he never told anyone what to say. He knew that Ryan Nagel's truck was out there, but he didn't look at it because he was focused on the SUV. If John and Karen passed the house, they would have turned around on Cedar Crest and come back around. He says that he couldn't see inside the SUV. He didn't hear Julie Nagel's statements on the ride home. And regarding the group text, this came out on redirect. He says it looked like more snow had been dug out around the scene and the snow was starting to melt. And he drops the nugget that John O'Keefe and Bella's mom had a relationship at some point. Now, I can only, and this is speculation on my part now, I can only imagine the reason that this is significant is that they're going to say Karen got jealous when they said Bella's mom or Bella's house, and that's her motive. She got so pissed off that they were going to be near Bella's house that she backed over her boyfriend and left him for dead in the snow. Like I said, all speculation, but that's the only reason why Bella and Bella's mom have any significance in this story. I mean, Lally does bring up a lot of stuff that's insignificant, like the snow, the weather, that's significant, but we don't need to hear it from every single witness. We get it, like we've been beat over the head with it for long enough. It's got to go to motive. The score of the basketball game, what everybody drank, all of that. Yeah, it's irrelevant. But this, I feel like maybe is more relevant that they're going to try to say, and we've got witnesses coming that I will refer back to this comment about, but I feel like they're going to say when they were giving the directions to John and they said Bella's house, it triggered Karen, and that's why she did it. That's, like I said, just speculation on my part, but that's kind of the feeling I got. On Recross, when it said, tell them in the group text, he said that he was referring to Channel 4 News going into D&E. So he was telling Chris to tell the news the guy never went in the house, which, like I said, to me, that's not a reliable source of information. Yeah, he's the brother, but he wasn't there. So just because, if I said John never went in the house, would you believe me? I wasn't there. I don't know if he did or not. So, yeah, that's where we're at. Next up is his lovely wife, Jen McCabe. Like I said, it's going to be a long one, unfortunately. I worked so hard on that presentation. I got up, got around, did whatever, started working on it, and, I took breaks to eat and do whatever, but it took me until after 7 o'clock at night to get done with it. It's long. It's a lot, but it's important. So I hope that you will join me later for that. And like I said, we need to remember this is all about getting justice for this man, Officer John O'Keefe. Justice isn't convicting the wrong person. And if that's what is happening here, it's not justice for John, it's not justice for his family, and it's just plain wrong. I have to ask, if she gets acquitted because reasonable doubt or whatever, are they even going to look at this case anymore? Are they going to find out who really did what to John? His family deserves that. He deserves that. At this point, we all need that answer. So never forget why we're here. We are here to find out what happened to this man that night after he went out with his so-called friends. What happened? Who did it? And who needs to pay for it? So if you haven't already, please give this a like. It helps the channel. It helps get it in the algorithm. Share it with hashtag Karen Reed trial, John O'Keefe, Officer John O'Keefe, Canton. You know, there's a million hashtags out there that you can share it with. And if you're not already subscribed, get subscribed and join our discussion. Tell me what you think. Like I said, I'm trying to come at this like a juror, how I would feel hearing this as a juror, how I would process this information and make up my mind. And you guys are like my fellow jurors. And we need to discuss things so we can make the right decision. Like I said, there is now a This Country Girl's Life Facebook group you can join, and we'll be discussing things on there as well. So like, share, subscribe, and as always, I will see you all in the next one. Bye.